bad hair, syndication, and when the best TV shows were only seen on TV, the golden girl age of television when grade A teams took the next generation of television to places that today make us reminisce about the Wonder Years. Today on Talkily. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm joined by Sid.
Hello.
Josh.
Hey.
Christy.
Hello.
And today we're talking about TV shows from the 80s.
Yes.
Oh,
best.
yeah.
The best.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The absolute best.
Absolute best years.
Yep.
Before we took it all way too seriously.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh.
That's it.
That's
the
it,
show.
yeah.
Once
That's
again,
it. Good night,
we solved
everybody.
this problem.
We solved it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest differences, of course, is syndication, right? I mean, at the time, when a lot of shows came out, there was a lot of stipulation about, and there were some serialized shows, but I think for the most part, producers and people who are making the shows are very worried that when you started an episode, it has to end the exact same way almost, because they were worried about people coming into the next episode or the episode after that and not knowing what was going on or why someone was gone. Whereas today, you have a character that starts off as a main character, and by the end of the first season, they're gone, right?
Yeah, that kind of like bottling of things together inside of a 30-minute or 1 hour format.
Yeah.
Every show was a
Yeah.
bottle show, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, because every show back in those days, they were like literally its own episode, like other than like story arcs, which came later in the 90s, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there were some shows that had arcs, but they weren't
yeah.
like
Arcs were
today.
like loose though.
They were
Yeah,
very
they're very
loose.
loose.
It was
right.
like,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's a recurring character. He will still come back at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Right? We just
like-
don't know when.
The arc is like so-and-so has daddy issues, and that carries to the entire series, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And when his dad shows up, it's annoying.
Yeah.
Like,
Like Wheeler's dad and Degrassi.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think in the 80s, they had better soap operas. Like, for example, Dallas or Remington Steele.
Oh,
or,
yeah.
Dynasty. I mean, you take a look at those, and then you take a look at, Days of Our Lives. I first started watching it in the 80s. Now, I mean, I could go and watch it, and
Well,
like,
Christy,
what
Yeah.
the
you said
heck?
you would never talk to me about daytime shows, but you have to know, you're my lost sister.
Oh.
I took off the glasses too soon. I'm supposed
no,
to
you
say,
did-
yeah,
are we
I'm
going to be able to get a good shot in on that? When the...
You probably have to do a little digital zoom.
it's in 4K, but we'll see. Yeah, but I surely should have done is, you had no idea I was your lost brother, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Well, that's the thing, right? That's the 80s shows. It's like there's that dramatic effect at the time. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
now it's like, I mean, I grew up in the 80s. Okay, so you had your 80s Happy Days, you had Laverne and Shirley, you had those, you had
Three's Company, 18.
exactly.
A lot of, yeah.
Exactly.
House.
Mine were all like mine were all action shows, right? Like that's what I was watching
Yeah.
as a little kid.
Like even cartoons, 80s cartoons too.
80s cartoons.
Teenage
were-
Mutant
I-
Ninja Turtles. You got The Simpsons, which started in 89
Transformers.
anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there are some good cartoon shows now.
Yeah.
But, if you want to talk about how many good quality ones there were, like,
Oh, there were tons.
There were
Tons.
tons.
Absolutely tons.
Like the writing, even the animation.
they
was
had like
cool.
a weight
over
behind them.
good, how many good shows there
The
were.
Smurfs. Like, I mean, if I see the Smurfs back in the 80s, which were, and then you take a look at the animation and stuff of them like now, or like, what did
It's
you
like-
do?
I don't know.
What is that, right?
What did you do to my Smurfs?
It's like
Yeah.
everything's like 3D. you know?
Everything's like really poorly done.
Poorly
3D.
done 3D.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's like zero budget.
It's like they've done it in the most lazy thing
I mean,
possible.
this is
If you're
just what
gonna
I've
do
seen.
it,
I don't have kids, so I don't.
yeah. If you're gonna
see it
do it
very often,
3D,
thank
do
God.
it right. If not, like stick it to 2D animation, like back in those days. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
What
was
Yes.
wrong with good old 2D animation,
we sound like old
guys?
people here, right?
Exactly.
Like,
Come
Yes,
on.
yes.
You know, but it's true though in a way if you think about it, right? Like
Oh,
you have to, like,
exactly. Yeah.
you know?
Like you take a look at the cartoons nowadays, and even Bugs Bunny. They did something to Bugs Bunny because in the 80s it was great, And
Well,
then
yeah,
all of a sudden,
well-
like, it's not even on anymore, is
well,
it?
Bugs Bunny is like it was originally done in the 50s, and then they touched it up in the 80s, which made it even better. So then if they kept the animation, if they retouch it up again by bringing it into HD quality, then it'll remain timeless forever.
Zoom right in on Bugs Bunny's little ears.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's just
4K animation.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I think, but if you take a look at like Pixar or something like that, that's fine. But I mean, did we even have like the cartoons?
That's like high-end movie
that is
production
movie.
versus
But we
weekly
had in the
television
80s,
shows.
we had 101 Dalmatians. We had like those movies, like the Disney movies were great.
Yeah, like what was it?
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty. You have Beauty and the Beast, which is
Beauty and the
89. There's there's one right now that I can't think. Little Mermaid.
You had Bambi.
Little Mermaid.
Everyone
Bambi.
was terrified by Bambi.
Bambi came out, I think, in the
Is everyone
50s.
It came out in the
traumatized by
50s,
that?
but
Yeah.
but
Oh, was it?
yeah,
It
it
was
came out in the
later.
50s.
Did
But
it get re-released?
it got re-released
Okay,
numerous
that's a
times
story.
over
My
the
parents
years.
took me to see Bambi in the theaters when I was a
Yeah.
kid, and I had to leave crying. Like,
Yeah,
that's, come on, it's traumatizing. So that's what
but
I'm
it's a
remembering.
classic.
It's a classic, and same with the E.T. E.T.
Ooh, okay, we're gonna talk about ET, are we?
No. We'll move on. We'll move back.
It's TV
We're
shows.
gonna move back to TV shows.
We could do an entire on how I hate ET.
We can do
so
an
much.
entire show just on ET for you, Josh.
80s movies. How about that?
Okay,
That's another topic
I
to
can
discuss.
I can see your blood pressure rising through the
Man.
veins in your neck.
Anyway.
Okay, Dukes of Hazzards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dukes of Hazzard.
yeah.
The Daisy Dukes.
What do we think? Okay, so why do we think like TV from the 80s? Like, I mean, we know why. I mean, one of some of the reasons that we because you don't really talk about, oh, this show was great from the 70s. And I mean, sometimes we talk about shows from the 90s being pretty good, you know, but I feel like, it's like a few shows from the 2000s, from the 60s, 50s, etc. I mean, the 80s seems to be one of those, it's that era where, you like, I mean, when people look back at the 2000s and 2010s, I mean,
golden era of television.
I think, they're going to be talking about all the permanence of, how good streaming has gotten and all that stuff, HBO shows.
But they won't be talking about how good the TV shows were. Like,
well, I feel like it's this era, like this decade that we're in now, and it was the 80s, sometimes a little bit the 90s, but then everything else was kind of like
different things, though. I think like the production value now is of a certain has surpassed, especially writing quality, surpassed like Hollywood production value, writing quality.
It has.
I mean, you've got like a weight that's at least equal or greater than. The writing quality and production value of the 80s was nothing, right? Especially when you compare it to movies that were being made at the time.
Yes.
So we're talking about like a nostalgia versus an actual critical quality.
if you want to talk quality, yes, of course, we've got the better quality now.
Yeah.
In terms of storyline, like learning something, like, okay, for example, The Cosby Show or something like that. Like there was always a story. You always learned something.
Yeah,
that's true.
Different strokes. You learn something.
You see that they have usually each episode would try and convey some type of message, right? And that pervade, I think, even until the into the 90s with like Home Improvement and all shows like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
It was sort of like that formulaic, we're gonna sort of reinforce the middle values of middle America kind of.
Yeah, and I feel like probably by by the 2000s, it started getting old and stale, right? Because essentially we're talking about some of these the traditional family sitcoms that are they died out.
That formulaic version it like started in the 80s. Like they discovered that okay, we can, if we check this box, and this box, we've got ourselves an episode.
Yeah.
And that's how we can we can kind of like mass produce it. But I wouldn't argue that it was better.
Yeah.
It might have been like, it's kind of like a comfort food. It's like a nice warm blanket that wraps itself around you that I totally love. Yeah.
I feel nowadays we still we don't look back a lot of the times at the 70s. We don't look back necessarily at the 90s. And again, 90s, that's a whole other show.
That's a show coming up. Stay tuned.
Yeah, but the 80s specifically. I mean, even now with Stranger Things, they're bringing stuff back to the 80s.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe it's just the era itself. Like when we keep looking back, because I feel like with the 80s shows, like shows from the 80s, that I remember and I grew up. I don't know if it's because I just grew up with these shows as a kid.
Probably.
Yeah.
If it's just a nostalgia thing.
Or just this nostalgia thing that's relating to the 80s. Yeah, like Stranger Things, right? And then even relays down to music, too, which is another entire topic to talk about. But briefly touching upon that, like you have these artists now who are like bringing back retro wave or synth wave, like songs that sound like from the 80s, but they're made like 2 years ago
love it.
or 3 years ago, which is awesome in itself, by the way. So there's that nostalgia factor going on with those shows and movies that we listen.
I think millennials and like I don't know where the line is between like older millennials, later Gen X kind of thing is what we're talking about. Like it now has that market power, right?
Yeah.
We now have that.
Yeah.
We now have that market power to kind of so like people are just sculpting entertainment around that, so to speak.
Exactly.
We're seeing a resurgence.
Like you feel like in the like you said, like we are the producers now. We are the directors. We are, and that's why the 80s, the Gen X, which I am, and you're later Gen X. That's why we are producing what we know and what worked.
Okay, so what are your favorite shows from the 80s? I know we listed some now, but what was your favorite show from the 80s and why?
Well,
to put you on the spot,
it's gotta be the. Well, this is hard.
It's
I can't
tough.
do this.
It's tough.
All right, I'm gonna go with the A Team for Josh because
like
I was a small boy. It was like guns and adventure and like fun times. I love that nobody ever got killed. They always built something, right? Like they built like at the end of the episode, they built a tank to solve all their problems.
It was like a giant cartoon show, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's what it was. It was like a cartoon just taken into ridiculous concepts.
And I feel the characters
loved
too,
that show.
Right? The characters too were very distinct.
Oh my gosh, they were over the top. That's mine.
I don't think I could go with like a specific. I could go with like my favorite action. I would say would be MacGyver.
I was going to say
I totally
that.
forgot about MacGyver.
I would say MacGyver.
I might change my answer.
Yeah.
Now, for something that I would rush home at 4:00 after school to watch, would be The Cosby Show.
Cosby, yeah.
Oh yeah, The Cosby Show.
Something at night would probably be Dallas. Like, I mean, I have like different. I just can't put my foot on. It's like, okay, I want that one.
Sid?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say, I was gonna say MacGyver. Yeah, that was one of my one thing
I'd
too.
be willing
but
to change my answer to MacGyver if it achieves consensus.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
So it's up to you, Alvin.
But there were other shows that I enjoyed too from the 80s that were in reruns. Like A-Team was another one too.
A-Team, yeah.
And of course, well, this is another topic to talk about in its own separate podcast, but Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah, well, I'm a fan, obviously.
Yeah. And there's also and then even cartoons like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh yes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That was like my big thing too back in those days. Like even there were reruns even though I grew up in the 90s. I'm born in 87.
Transformers
is another thing.
Growing up that
Yeah.
and
And then of course there's Fresh Prince, not French Prince, but
French
Prince.
Yeah.
French Prince was a different show.
It was actually. In fact, I'm referring to another person, but whatever.
Great, like King Louis crossover, Fresh Prince episode. I got an idea now.
Oh my God.
Run with it. Yeah.
That sounds.
Yeah.
I'm curious now.
Yeah.
See, I never watched Ninja Mutant. See, I don't even know what
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
that. No.
Turtles in a half shell.
No, but
Turtle
I
power.
did.
Turtle power, yeah.
But of course, I did watch Transformers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did, of course, what was that one? He-Man or like...
Oh my God, He-Man.
He-Man.
There's Teddy Ruxpin. I don't know if you remember that show.
Yeah.
No, I did not watch that one.
Care Bears.
Care Bears.
Yeah.
Strawberry Shortcake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we got to do an entirely different show on just the cartoons themselves.
Just on
Because-
the cartoons. Yeah.
We're just touching up on it though.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
But it's
right,
80s,
yeah,
right?
because like I mean, with that, I mean that's a whole subject in its own. Because I mean,
Yeah.
even cartoon shows, I feel. I mean, if you want to compare, the comparison can be made between I feel like shows from today's day and age, where we move to more serialized streaming on demand
like
services,
dramas
and stuff like that, versus what they had, in the 80s. But now with cartoons, like I mean, I feel it's just been a steady decline of cartoons, and there were some good exceptions from the 90s. But again, I feel like starting from the 80s was its peak, and then the 90s you started to see a decline, but there were still good shows, and then by the 2000s, and then now. And I'm talking Saturday morning cartoons, right?
Yeah, don't you remember waking up
Swim.
Saturday morning, sitting in front of the TV and
Oh gosh.
watching cartoons
My
in the
Fruit
morning?
Loops or whatever.
Yes.
My dad used to work midnights on Friday night and then would come home early Saturday and he'd always bring a box of like donuts
Oh,
in, and like it was
wow.
like the
That's
donuts
pretty
with
awesome.
the cartoons and dad's coming back. It was just
That's awesome, actually.
At a
Takes me
certain
back.
age now, I wonder if even kids even watch Saturday,
don't-
like even watch cartoons in
You
the
know
morning
what? They
anymore.
probably don't
You can just
because
stream it.
They'll be streaming it on their
or
phones.
they have too
or
much
on the
time. They
iPads.
have too much stuff. Like, I mean, this is how okay, this
It's
is a
true.
totally different topic, but this is how we used to relax as kids. Like before we used to have that time on Saturday, we would just veg and watch cartoons.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we were still active. We would still go outside in the 80s. We would still do all that. Like, I mean, we played outside. We did all that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, kids are up at 6. They've got gymnastics. They've got soccer. They've got hockey. They've got this and this. And they're up at from 6 o'clock in the morning all the way till like 10 o'clock at night. And they don't even have any.
That sounds like it sucks.
Yeah.
I don't
yeah,
have
like,
kids. Parents out there, stop doing that.
Stop. Let your
That
kids
sounds like-
be kids.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Let them be kids, you know?
Switching gears again, I feel like shows from today's day and age are willing to tackle certain things. And in the 80s, though, on the flip side, they were very, they wanted to keep things very,
Like
they were very careful.
matter of fact,
Yeah,
like
very
in
careful.
For example,
in their
like
subject
Degrassi.
matter, right?
yeah.
when Spike got pregnant in Degrassi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
that
big
that was
was
a
huge.
huge
I would
deal.
argue that a lot
That
of
was a
shows
huge deal back then.
didn't
Didn't do-
tackle anything,
were-
not
there
just
were a lot
of
cartoons.
shows.
Like
They wanted
you know,
to play it safe. So I
Yeah.
will say that about 80s
Yeah.
shows versus shows from today,
Yeah.
they played it very safe with a lot of things, and it was news when a show decided to try and do
And it-
something.
It was also that the shows
Yeah.
were just representing a narrow segment of the population too, right? Like
Yeah.
white middle class,
Yeah.
That's
you know,
it.
like
Exactly.
values.
Yeah,
That's who had the market power, and that's who controlled the message, right?
Yeah.
And now
Exactly.
you've got more of a diversity of that
Yeah.
going along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was because you don't now they're like you take a look at a TV show nowadays and it's got like to be quite honest, I did not know like about certain things until I went into university. Like because it was not like brought forward to me. It was not talked about like gay and lesbian, like none of that.
Yeah.
We did not have it
Even
in
into the 90s.
Or if it was like a special episode. It was like a
Yeah,
special
yeah.
episode of
Ellen show, like I mean, her
Oh,
show
yeah.
was that. Then I think it was the 90s actually. Well, I don't know if it was the 90s or the 80s, but
probably
No, it was 90s. I think
90s. But I mean, yeah, but even in the 90s, that was a controversial thing where she lost her show because of that. In
Right.
the
Yeah,
80s, they wouldn't even
exactly.
dare touch that.
They wouldn't even
it,
have
it never,
touched that,
It wouldn't
no.
have aired. I don't think.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you had an episode, I don't know. I'm going to pick on Cheers because like we recently tried to rewatch it and it didn't.
you say
It
you're
didn't-
saying it.
Oh, yeah, Cheers,
it didn't. It didn't. It wasn't as timeless as I was hoping it would be. I think there are other shows from that area that are. But like Cheers just didn't, just because of like the rampant sexism and
Oh,
some of
yeah,
the like,
yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
just
And that's why it
so
was
many
on
jokes. Just the whole thing is like about Sam being Sam and Diane being Diane and
Exactly.
like that.
Yep.
And I was looking forward to her getting off the show because I'm like, get her off the show. And then they replaced her with Kirstie Alley,
Yes.
who is not any better. Like
No,
they
no,
try.
no,
They
yeah.
give her a
Yeah.
jacket. They give her a
Yeah.
blazer with
Much
like
more
shoulder
businesswoman
pads.
oriented.
And she's
Yeah.
supposed
Yeah.
to be this businesswoman, but she just isn't written any
And that's
better.
why it was
Yeah.
at like
Sam
at
is
8
just-
o'clock at night. I mean, don't you
Yeah.
remember there were certain shows that they were only done at 8 o'clock or 9
Was that
o'clock
one
at
of
night?
them?
That was one of them.
Yep.
That was one of them that it was
Oh.
done
From what I remember,
because that's
like,
why certain kids because it was done in a bar.
Because Sam occasionally like
Got
talked
drunk
about having
and
sex. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was done.
Yeah.
There were
Oof.
nowadays, like I mean, you could have sex at 6 o'clock. You could see it at 5 o'clock. Like I mean, nowadays it's like
Yep.
But back in the days, the only show that was very unbelievable was the Cosby Show because that was your first
Mm. Yeah.
like I wouldn't say controversial, but it was like your first family that was not your typical white family in the 80s watching it, right?
Yeah.
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 And I
I mean, it was a big leap
And it
forward
was a
at the time.
great show.
Yeah, whatever you feel about Bill Cosby and how he is
Yeah,
now,
whatever he did.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
but-
I'm not talking
we're
about
talking
him.
about
I'm
now.
talking about his
specifically
show.
the show.
The
Yeah.
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
The show was great, and then it went into a different world.
When did
Yeah.
Oprah release?
Well, her
Oprah
show,
when did her show?
her show
start?
came out.
In the 80s.
There we
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it
and
wasn't popular at first.
No,
It wasn't.
No,
It wasn't. No. And then I don't even.
But it
We
grew.
had to start somewhere.
It
Yeah.
grew. Yeah.
was Family
My mom would
Matters
rush home every
80s or
day.
90s?
I don't know.
To-
I
to
feel like we
watch
should have researched this
Oprah?
more, but
Yeah.
it's just
Because Family Matters also even if it was in
Exactly,
the 90s,
family-
it
yeah.
brought further to, they're not like, the typical white middle class
exactly,
type
yes,
family,
yes.
there's
there
other
did
people
seem to be like a
involved
critical
too.
mass. Of,
Yeah.
But there were only those were those only 2 shows.
Yeah, and those
The rest of
those
them
two
were
shows.
basically you had different strokes. Who this bazillionaire rich guy
Yeah, I
adopted
remember that show.
these 2 little black kids.
Yeah.
and the
The
not as
Manners-
good knockoff
Family Matters
Silver
89.
Spoon.
Yeah,
Oh my
there you go.
goodness, silver spoons.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite?
Yeah, we hadn't
The
gotten
Next
favorite.
Generation. Honestly, started
Oh.
the Next Generation.
That's like
yeah, because
okay.
I'm a big nerd. But I have to pick a different
I
one
would
to
pick
be.
that one. I just put it in a whole other
Yeah.
category.
Yeah,
of
Because
shit.
that's going to
Transformers
be
otherwise.
like,
Yeah.
If I leave, every answer will be Star Trek: The Next Generation. If
Yeah,
if I don't remove
Yeah,
it from
yeah,
the
yeah.
conversation.
So, but okay, so that's where would you stick that? Would you? That's in a whole category itself, right?
I would, because I love that show.
Exactly. So then, if you had to say like a
Thing about it though is that it started in the 80s,
Yeah.
but finished in the 90s, and I think of it more as a 90s show. Like
probably, yeah,
we
yeah.
associate
It's
it with
kinda
the
like that-
golden years of 90s Trek.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air too. It started in the
Started in
80s, finished
80s.
in the 90s.
Yeah.
Same with Family Matters,
Yeah.
same with Full
Yeah.
I don't know
House.
if you can count it as an
Yeah.
actual 80s show.
Yeah, but it did start in that
I
era.
don't think people would think The Simpsons is an 80s show.
Yeah, but they share that era, right? And then
Yeah.
The Simpsons, well, that's actually a totally different episode or another podcast to talk about. But yeah, it started in 89 and goes on today,
Yeah.
Exactly.
like over
yes,
30 years
yes.
later almost.
Yes, like so. Yeah, so I wouldn't consider any show in the 80s or like 80s shows. Like they wouldn't still be going on today. Like
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it would start in the
Yeah,
80s and it
and
would
it'll end in the
end
80s, yeah.
in the 80s.
Yeah, yeah.
So like you said, I would consider Fresh Prince a 90s show. 'cause
Yeah.
it
Right.
ended in the
That is
90s.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair to say. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like same with, whereas like say you have Knight Rider, it started in the
Knight
80s and ended
Rider.
in the 80s, right?
Knight
Yeah.
Rider.
Oh man, that show.
Oh.
Did
That
they
was-
watch Airwolf?
I watched a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was
That
the
was a-
actor? Who's the main actor in Airwolf?
Oh,
It was like that old-
Michael thing.
I forgot, but
no, it changed. They switched in the 3rd season. I think they have a new guy. I know way too much about Airwolf for
the theme song for that
it
show
was
was
a
awesome.
super helicopter that flew around blowing stuff up and had a secret lair in a volcano.
Yeah,
like, how cool was
right.
that?
Thanks again for joining us on Talkily for another cool discuss. Joining me today for TV shows from the 80s was Sid, Josh, and Christy. Intro-outro music is Illuminate by Ethan Rank, found on ArtList. All additional music also acquired through ArtList. All images and videos in our show acquired through Pixabay. Podcasting services acquired through Spreaker. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. If you enjoyed the show, please visit cooldiscuss.com, check out our merch store, or consider making a donation so we can continue producing content. Keep in mind, we are just normal, everyday people talking about things we think we know something about. We are certainly not experts on anything. Always take everything you read or hear or see with a grain of salt. Never get all your information from only one place, and always be willing to question. This is AWC thanking you once again for joining us for a cool discuss.